Hi everyone, it's Hannah from Hanjan Crochet, and today we are making this super simple round neck crochet tee together. It's a lovely top, perfect for spring, summer, autumn and the winter if you want to layer it up. Actually, it's really versatile. It is slightly oversized and I've designed it that way, but you can of course go down sizings because it comes in extra small through to 5XL, so you can just pick the finished measurement that you know will fit and suit you best. You can find the pattern either as an ad-free PDF in my stores or to view for free over on my blog, and I'll put all the information in the description below. Whichever size you're making, you will need to go and find that pattern because I'll be talking you through the mechanisms and the steps that we need today, but obviously I can't give all of the different numbers for all of the different sizes. So go find the pattern and grab your materials, and on that note we'll just have a quick word as to what we're going to need. So to make the top, I chose to use Gloss, which is a DK weight yarn from WeCrochet, and this is the shade Moonlight. It's absolutely beautiful to work with. It has, where's the information? Here we are. We've got 70% merino wool and 30% silk. You can of course substitute with a yarn of your choice, but do make sure that it meets the gauge and that you're happy with the drape of it. Along with your yarn, you're going to need a 4.5mm crochet hook to work the body section, or the hook that matches the gauge for you. And then I have dropped down to a 3.5mm crochet hook to do the neckline ribbing and the armbands here. You're going to also need a pair of scissors, a needle for your ends, which I don't know where mine is actually, and a couple of stitch markers might be helpful too. So go grab the pattern, go grab your supplies, meet me back here and we'll get going. Now before we start, a quick word on the construction of this. So we're going to be working, if I swivel it this way, from side across. So we start with a very, very long piece of fabric that becomes the front. I need to weave my ends in, shh, don't tell anyone. A long piece of fabric that becomes both the front and the back. So we do the entire length of the front and the back all in one go. And then we work this side portion here up until we get to where we want the neckline to be. Then we're going to carry on and we're going to work the back section here. Then we'll do the front section in here. So basically just keep working rectangles is what we do. And then finally you join it all together and you work your second side. Then when we've done that, we just simply seam up the two sides to wherever you would like them to be. You can go all the way down to the bottom, or you can leave some little detailing here as I have. And then the armholes can be any depth that you like. Of course, I've given information in the pattern for standardized sizings, but you can adapt this to be however fitted or loose you want it to be. Then we just pop the ribbing on the armbands and around the neck, and we're done. Whichever size you're making, our first job is to make one long side panel, and it uses the same stitch repeat that we're using for the whole of the sweater. So what I'm going to do, rather than show you chaining out 199 or something like that, what I'm going to do is chain out a small amount because it's any stitch repeat. There's any multiple that you can change this to, and then I will show you how that side panel is created, and then we will move on from there. So in the pattern, chain the amount of chains that it tells you for the size that you're making to start this side panel. So I'm just going to start with a small amount here now so that I can then show you how we work this stitch pattern. Okay, so once you have the number of chains that you need for the size that you're making, we are going to, for row 1, turn our work to work into the back bumps, and we're going to work a slip stitch into the back bump of each of these stitches. Now the thing with the slip stitches is we just keep them nice and gentle, nice and loose, especially here because this will be the side and the seam of your sweater here. So nice and gently just work a slip stitch in each of those. Now I often get asked for any tips and tricks for working slip stitches in my patterns, and my best advice that I find works well for me is well, there are two things. One is keep your hook as straight as you possibly can. So the temptation I sometimes find is to dig down if you're trying to dig for a stitch, whereas actually if you keep it nice and flat, that will force you to keep the stitch upwards and higher. and if you angle downwards, then that will pull the stitch tighter. And the last thing you want for slip stitches is for them to be tight, and that's a common problem. That's what I get an awful lot when people message me about slip stitch ribbing and so on. They find that their stitches are just too tight. And that's one of the common problems that I think can be solved easily by keeping your hook nice and flat. And the other thing is to not hold onto your hook too tightly. Now, I know I hold mine slightly differently to lots of people, but the essence is there. Don't grip too tightly onto your hook. Just have a nice gentle hold of it. And that will mean you won't put too much pressure on that stitch as it comes through. Just let it glide through gently. Then when you've finished row 1, we're going to turn. Obviously, you'll have a huge amount more stitches than I have got here. And what we're going to be doing is all the way across this row, we're going to be working into the front loop only of each of the stitches. And now here, what I like to do for the very first stitch, rather than do a turning chain, is to work a stacked stitch. So a stacked stitch, which is going to be a equivalent of a US treble, we're going to need to work into this front loop only of this first stitch. So we have our front and our back loop there. I'm going into the front loop only, which can be a challenge on this first one, so don't worry, take your time and be patient. There we go. I'm going to work a single crochet there in that first front loop, and then into the side of that single crochet, I'm going to work another single crochet, and then into the side of that single crochet, I'm going to work another single crochet. So that will bring us up to the height of a treble stitch. So then with that first stitch complete, we now need to work a treble into the rest of the front loops of each of the stitches. So in order to do that, we yarn over twice and we go down into that front loop of the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2. And that's our nice long stitch that we're going to use throughout the whole of the sweater. So yarn over twice, down into that front loop that we have there, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So work away all the way along this row now into the front loops, working a treble in each. Lovely. So at the end of that row, it's really important to set your work down and realize that it's perfectly okay for it to be curving like this. That is no problem at all. When we work the next row, you'll see that it will pull it in again. So we're doing alternate rows of these long stitches and then slip stitches, and each of them has their purpose of adding height and then pulling in. So don't worry if yours looks like mine does and a little bit wonky right now. So we turn to work row 3 and we're going to chain 1 and then we're going to slip stitch in the front loop only of each of the stitches across. So just nice and gently, the same things apply with keeping your hook nice and flat. I'm really mindful of whether I keep it flat now or not. There we go, keep it nice and flat and a nice gentle grip on your hook. And if you find it really tricky with the slip stitches, maybe change your hook hold to see if that makes a difference. So if you're a pencil holder, then change to a knife and vice versa. And that's it for the stitch repeat for the entire sweater. So now what we need to do is keep repeating that for the number of times it tells you for the size you're making. So make sure you refer back to the pattern and see what it tells you. I need to repeat this for my size up until row 13, and then row 14 you'll see that you get to repeat row 2 again, so our long stitches again for all of the sizes. So go ahead and repeat this for the size for your side panel. You'll end up working an even number of rows, and then come back to me when you're ready and we will work the back together. So I have all of my rows worked for my side panel, and now I'm ready to turn, and in the pattern it now says back. Now we just need to work a portion of stitches for the back. Now all I need to do then is chain 1 and then slip stitch in the front loop only of the number it tells me for the back section, which for me is 99. When you've done all of those slip stitches, we now need to turn, and we're going to leave all of the rest of the stitches here. We're going to come back to those to do the front, but at the moment we're just going to work on this portion of stitches here for the back. And we're going to stay working with our established stitch pattern that we have now. So our first stitch is going to be a stacked treble in that front loop there of that first one. So we work a single crochet, one into the side of it, and another one into the side of it there. Then we're ready to start our long treble stitches into the front loop only of each of these stitches, just as we've been doing before. So then that's our row there, and that stitch count then will be the same as what you just did for your slip stitches, and that indeed is what carries on. Did that wrong, didn't I? I'm trying to talk and think and do. That is what carries on for the rest of the back portion. Now for all sizes, your back is going to be 16 rows now for the back. So we're going to carry on working these 2 rows that we've just done there, the slip stitches and then your tall treble stitches, and that will form the back portion of the sweater. So go ahead and work those 16 rows. When you get to the end of your 16 rows, don't break your yarn and come back to me, and then we'll talk about where we join and how we work the front. So now I've finished my 16 rows of the back section, and I've just put a stitch marker in that last stitch to keep it secure, and I've still got my yarn attached here for later. This is the side panel, that original side panel that we did, and this is the back. So what we now need to do is find the very next stitch that we haven't worked in on this last row of the side panel. So that's this stitch that we have here. And what we're going to do is grab a new ball of yarn, and we're going to join to that stitch, and we are going to work a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of the stitches along the rest of the row. So we're following along in the same pattern as we have been using, working a slip stitch in each of these. Now at the end of that row we need to turn, making sure you take all of your yarn and everything with you. There we go. And now we are back to working our long stitches. So we're going to work our stacked treble in this first front loop that we have here. And then you just need to, sorry, I was thinking there as I was doing and didn't do either very well. And then you just need to check in the pattern for the number of stitches you now need to do for this row. So they're going to be trebles in the front loop only, but you need to check mine. I need to do it for the next 82 stitches, but your size may well be different. So make sure that you check. Once you've completed the number of stitches you need there, we now over the next 2 stitches need to work a treble 2 together. Now that's really straightforward once you know how to do a treble. So we're going to begin in the front loop only a treble stitch there, but rather than yarning over and completing the stitch, we're actually going to yarn over twice and start a new treble stitch in the next one. So the front loop only of that one, we yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then at the end we've got 3 loops on the hook, can't speak, sorry, and we yarn over and we pull through all 3. So that has worked 2 stitches down and decreased them to 1 at the top there. So then we turn our work, and for row 3 of this section, I'm gonna, well, it's like playing who knows what with all the balls of yarn now. With this section now, we're ready to chain 1, and we're going to work a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of these stitches across. So now I've turned and I'm ready to work row 4, and that begins just as all of these rows have, with a stacked treble in that first stitch. And then we're going to work a treble in the front loop only of each of the stitches up until we have 2 left. Then when we get to the last 2 stitches, we're going to work a treble 2 together over the last 2, working in those front loops again, just to decrease those last 2 stitches down to 1. Now if you do find it tricky to get your hook in that last slip stitch, I find it's a good thing to go backwards first, and then you can go forwards. If you create yourself a space, then it's a lot easier to get through. And there we have it. Now we turn, ready to start working row 5. And now we have our straight section now. So row 5 is going to begin with a chain 1 and then a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of our stitches. And then row 6 is going to be our treble stitches, just as we've been working, or into all of the stitches along. And then we are plain sailing for a little while. We now need to work up until, let me just check, row 13. Of all any size that you're making, you now need to work up and see. I can't do it and talk at the same time, can I? We need to work up until row 13 in this established pattern now. So that will mean that you will end on one of these slip stitch rows that I'm doing right now. So if you work away to row 13, and then I will meet you back here and I'll show you what we do to go upwards and increase to shape the other side of the neckline. Okay, so I've worked up to the end of row 13, and now row 14 of the pattern tells me that I need to carry on working these tall stitches. So for row 14, I'm going to begin in exactly the same way. I'm going to work a stacked treble in that front loop of that first stitch there. And then after that, I'm going to work a treble in the front loop of each of the stitches up until I get to the last stitch. So if you want to work away and then meet me at the very last stitch of this row, and we'll do that last one together. Here we are at the last stitch then, and I'm going to work 2 treble stitches in this last one. So that's our first that goes into the front loop, and then that is our second. So that's the only change for this row. We just need to put 2 stitches in that last one. Then we're ready to turn, and we can work our normal row that we do on this side. We are going to chain 1, and then we're going to work a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of our stitches. So at the end of that row, we're going to turn and we're going to be ready to work row 16. And row 16 is the same as row 14 that we did. So we begin with that stacked treble in our first stitch in the front loop, and then we will work a treble. I couldn't think of the stitch there. We will work a treble stitch in the front loop only of each of the stitches up until the last stitch, just as we did on the row 14. And then when you get to the last stitch, you will work 2 treble stitches into it. So work all the way along this row up until we get to this very last stitch, and in the last stitch we need to work 2 treble stitches into it. Then when you've done that, you can break your yarn and come back to me and I'll show you what we do next. Here we are then back on the back panel where we left off. So now I'm going to undo that stitch marker that we have there and grab this last loop of yarn through. Because what we now need to do is start working back along these stitches, this last row of the back that we've done, and then we're going to join to the front. And the way that we do that is we're going to chain 1, and then we are going to slip stitch in the front loop only of each of the stitches along this back panel that we have. Then when we've worked all of those stitches of that back panel, we are going to chain 14. Then when you've got those 14, what we need to do is find where we left off on this front panel that we have literally just finished, and then we're going to start working a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of those stitches across. So this essentially joins our back panel to our front panel, and in a moment when I've done a few, I'll show you what the neck hole then looks like. So let's put that one in there. So then what we've done is we have joined to match the other side of the neckline here, and this is now where our head hole is. So what we're going to do is we're going to carry on working a slip stitch in the front loop only of each of these stitches up until we get to the end of the front section. And so then we've joined and we've got exactly the same number of stitches as we first began with on our very long side that we did. And then all we need to then carry on doing for the whole of this body section now is carrying on in our set pattern. So we're going to be doing the front loop only of a slip stitch when we're facing this direction, and then we turn and we work our treble stitches in the front loop only of each of those stitches of the other row. And the pattern, the written pattern, will tell you how many rows we need to do that for. It will be the same amount of rows as you did for this side, so that they will match. You'll have an equal number here as you will then have here. So if you want to go ahead and work your next side panel, and then when you've finished that, come back to me and we'll talk about sleeves and seaming. Once you've got that second side panel complete, we're now ready to seam up the sides and add our cuffs and collars if you would like to. So the seaming part of this process is actually very simple, and it's very much up to you and how deep, because the only thing we're going to add to this is our armholes. Now you have this very long side that goes across your front and your back. Now the first decision you have to make is what is going to be your right side and what is going to be your wrong side. You can use either of the textures for this, but you do need to decide at this point. So I'm going to, for this, be using this as my right side, but I'm going to be doing a seam that means that I can actually use it in a reversible way, but it's entirely up to you. If you want to crochet your seam together like I'm going to, it will be less noticeable if you then want to have the other side as an option to wear, because this also has a beautiful texture to this side too. So once you've decided which is going to be your right side, which for me I'm deciding this one, we then need to turn so that everything is lined up and our wrong side is facing us. So I'm going to line up my 2 bottom stitches here, and this is where the seam will begin if you would like it to. Now for this one I'm going to leave a small portion open so that it has a slight side split here on the hips where it can flare out a little for you. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can start seaming right from the very end here and work all the way up to where your armhole is going to be. Now I've got my fronts with the neck hole opening here facing down towards the table, and so this is my back section that I have here. Now in the pattern you will find guidance for each different size from extra small through to 5XL for what I would suggest the armhole depth would be. Now these are with standard measurements plus a little bit extra room to give a kind of classic fit, but if you want yours to be tighter or looser, it's entirely up to you. All you need to do, as it will become clear as we do it, will be to seam more or less of the stitches to leave either a smaller or a bigger hole for your armhole. As this is going to be like a loose summery tee, I would like mine to be fairly loose, but it is entirely up to you. Now to join these side seams, if you like to plan out ahead, then you absolutely can. You can use stitch markers and you can mark together, in fact, the stitches that you're going to begin in and then the stitches that you're going to end in, which will probably be somewhere down here. And in the pattern, as I say, it tells you the number of stitches that you need to join together for each of the different sizes to achieve the standard armhole depth. But the great thing about working from the bottom of the garment up towards the sleeve is that you can try it on as you go. And if you're crocheting them together, which is what I'm suggesting we do, then it's really easy to either do a few more if you want it tighter, or to undo a few if you want it looser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin in the 9th stitch from the end here. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So I'm going to put my hook into that stitch there, and then the corresponding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and then 9. And I'm just going to join my yarn in there, and then I will work into the next stitch and the next corresponding stitch on the other side, and I will work a slip stitch in there. So we're literally just slip stitching each of the subsequent stitches together for the total number of stitches that it tells you in the pattern for your size, or the number that then feels comfortable for you around your arm. Okay, then when you're happy with your armhole depth, you can break your yarn And then what we just need to do is flip around and repeat that process on the other side of the top. So obviously if you want to start working from the bottom to the top again, we're going to need to flip over rather than just around, and then we'll be able to start working from this side. So then repeat that seam on the other side so it matches, and then come back to me and we'll talk about sleeve cuffs and our neckline. So now with both of the side seams joined, we can add, I've already done one, don't worry, you haven't missed anything. I've already done one to show you before I do the other, one of the sleeve cuffs if you would like to. If you don't want to add these, you absolutely don't have to. But if you just want to give that nice little edging, then you can. It's really simple. We do a join as you go method and we're using yarn over slip stitches for this. And the great thing about this is you can tailor them to exactly how you would like them. So if you want them to cinch in a little bit like I have done with mine, then you can go down a whole hook size. So I've gone down from my 4.5mm hook that I did use for the body all the way down to a 3.5mm hook for this ribbing here. But if you don't want them tight at all, you can stick with your 4.5, or you can go somewhere in the middle with a 4mm. The great thing about ribbings and edges and stuff is that you can have a go and see how it fits for you and see how you like it, and then adjust. I think the hook size is the easiest thing to adjust in this case to change how it sits on you. So I'm really happy now with the fit of this one that I have, and now I'm going to work the exact same thing on the other armhole. So I've got my right side facing me, but as I said before, you can have a right and a wrong side. It doesn't really matter. You can have this reversible because as you can see, the ribbing looks just as nice on the other side as it does on this front side that I have here. So either way, this will work. But I have got what I'm calling my front side facing me, and on this second armhole that I'm ready to now do, I'm going to join my yarn to the stitch, the very last stitch that has been joined on this underarm seam here. So grab your yarn, and there's only a few stitches per row, so don't be worried about trying this and then deciding that you want to change it or, you know, adapt it, change your hook size, etc. So we're going to join our yarn, and then I'm going to chain 5, but you can change that number depending on how long you would like your cuff to be. And then I'm going to work a yarn over, let me check I've done that. I counted in my head as I was talking. It doesn't always work. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Yeah, we're good. So now I'm going to put my yarn over my hook, and then in the second chain from the hook, I'm going into the back bump that we have here. And I'm going to yarn over and pull through, and then pull through everything. So that's our yarn over slip stitch. So it's like a slip stitch, but you literally just yarn over before you go into the stitch. So then we yarn over, go into the next back bump that we have there, yarn, pull through, so we yarn over and pull through everything. And I will say these first ones are the trickiest ones to do, because not only are you going into chains, but you're also going into a short amount of chains, which means you don't have quite as much room to maneuver. But as I say, I like this stitch very much for ribs, and my trick is to twist my hook as I pull it through there at the back. So on the next run, I'll make sure that we look at that closely so that it might help you if you're getting stuck. So then when we get back down, we're going to work a slip stitch into just one stitch, the next stitch along of the armhole here. And then we're going to turn, but you're only going to turn the little cuff that we're actually going to make here, because now we're going to work into the back loops of these stitches that we have there. So we've got 4 of them, and we're going to work a yarn over slip stitch into the back loop only of all 4 along here. So there's 2, that's 3, and then the last one, number 4, you can work into the back loop or you can work into the full part of the stitch. It's entirely up to you. I think the full part of the stitch just gives a slightly neater edge, so that's what I'm going to do for mine, but it's entirely up to you. And then you're ready to turn, and I'm only doing it like that because it's at arm's length for me on this table. And then we're going to chain 1, And then we're going to work a yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only, so right around over here, the furthest loop that you can find. And then for this row, and from now on, when we get back to the armhole here, we're actually going to slip stitch in the next two. So there's one, and then there's two. We just did one at the very first instance because we'd already been attached to one there. So then we turn, and then we're going to yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only, bearing in mind you've got two that you've just slip stitched in. We just completely ignore those, and then we have 1, 2, 3 and 4 here. So 1, there's 2, 3 and 4, either into the full stitch or into the back loop, depending on what you prefer. And that's it. We just keep repeating that all the way around the armhole. So here we are, I'm going to chain one, and then I'm going to yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only of each of these stitches along. So 4 stitches here, but as I say, you can change that by changing the length of your foundation chain and make them as long or as short as you would like them. Now we're back here, and we're going to slip stitch in the next 2. And then you just carry on going back and forth, joining all the way around this armhole until we get back to where we began here. And then once we've done the neckline, I'll show you how we join these seams together at the end of them. Right, so now we've added both of our sleeve cuffs, we can now do the same principle to the neckline. And I've got the front here facing me because we've got our scoop neckline. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn so that I have the right side facing me, but I have the back of the sweater, because what I want to do is start, because we're going to have a seam somewhere, and the seam to my mind is best off being at one of the shoulder points, so at the back of the neckline here. So to work this neckline, I'm going to join to the side of this the long stitch that we come across here. Now if you remember, we worked our stacked stitches for the first stitches of each of these rows, and that's really helpful right now because we can see that there's 1, 2 and 3 per side of the row, per long stitch. And it's up to you, but I think I'm going to cinch my neckline in just a little bit more. I'm going to skip what will be the slip stitch row here. I'm just going to count these 3 stitches as the sides of my rows that I can join to, but that's entirely up to you if you want yours to be looser or tighter. It's completely your decision. So we're going to chain as many as you would like. I'm going to go with 5 again so that it matches my sleeve cuffs. And then in the second chain from the hook, we're going to yarn over, and then we're going to work a yarn over slip stitch. So for me, there'll be 4 of those. Oh, there will be 4 of those. And then when you've done the stitches that you need, you can then slip stitch in the next stitch along, which is the side of one of those long stitches that we have. And then you're going to turn your work, and you're going to yarn over slip stitch in the back loop only of each of your stitches along. So I've got 4 here, but just make sure you keep track of how many that you have. And again, in that last stitch, you can go into the back loop or you can go into the full part of the stitch, entirely up to you. And then you're ready to turn. We're going to chain 1 and then into the back loop only, work that yarn over slip stitch into each of those stitches. Then when you finish that, we have our 3rd stitch of this long stitch that we have here. So we're going to slip stitch into that one and then into the first of the next long stitch. So then you're ready to turn and then work just as we did for the sleeves, yarn over slip stitch in each of the back loops here. And that's it for the neckline. you're going to work all the way across the back here. And then when I've finished counting those, you're going to work all the way across the back here up until where it starts to turn for the neckline. Let me take the hook out and I will turn it over and show you. Because then we go all the way along here, down the side of the neckline that we have here, and this turns into stitches. You remember those stitches that we made to create that neckline, so you'll join to 2 each time you come back to here. And then we've got the sides of stitches again, so you will have 3 per long stitch that we have here, and then you'll go back to stitches here at the side. We're going to work all the way around this neckline. However, if you would like to slip stitch into more stitches as you go along, if you want a much tighter neckline, then do. You can slip stitch into 3 as you go. It's absolutely up to you. Or you can slip stitch into 2, or you can do 2, then 3, 2, then 3. I really encourage you, this is the place that you can really personalize this and make it suit your taste. And I like to do that with all of my designs, so that, because, well, we're all different, aren't we? We're all different as to how we like things like cuffs and necklines. So please feel confident enough here to have a go and see how you would like to change and adapt your neckline here. So go for it all the way around, and then all you're going to be doing is working a slip stitch seam to join this cuff when you get back here. So join me back and I'll just quickly show you how we do that at the end there. Okay, so I have worked all the way around that neckline, and now I've slip stitched into the side of the stitches again there. And what I'm going to do is stop flapping it around, sorry, so you can actually see what I'm going to do. I'm going to line up the last row of stitches that I've just worked here and the first row of stitches that we began the neckline with, and I'm just going to slip stitch those together. So we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4 stitches, and I'm going to just choose a loop. Just be consistent with your loops is all you need to do, and then choose a loop of the corresponding stitch on the first row and just slip stitch those together, and then just work for those. It's only the 4 that we have here, or as many as you've chosen to do, and you just work away joining them with those slip stitches. And then when you finish, you can just break your yarn, but of course my scissors are miles away from me. Oh, there they are. Break that yarn, and then you are ready to weave in that end. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you've enjoyed making this simple tee with me. If you make one, please do come and show me. I'm Hanjan Crochet all over social media, wherever you expect me to be. Come and find me and show me, and I will see you again soon.